Welcome to Sports Beat KC. I am Blair Kerkhoff. I am pleased to have in the studios of the Kansas City Star Bob Davis, the 13-time Kansas Broadcaster of the Year, 13 or 14.
Well, that's 14 now with this last
There
one.
we go.
But
How about
who's
that?
counting?
14.
Right?
That's wonderful. You know, for the past couple of weeks, while the Star was in between beat writers for Kansas, I filled in, and my seat assignment at Allen Fieldhouse is right next to the radio duo of Bob Davis and Greg Gurley.
Sorry about that.
And I'll tell you, I have been stunned by the number of well-wishers that come up to you before the game, after the game, and sometimes while you're on the air.
Right.
and wanting to, just wanting to tell you how much you have meant to them and really enhance their enjoyment of college sports. In November, you announced your retirement, and I sensed that the news was met with some disbelief by many Kansas fans who kind of only know the Jayhawks through your voice. And now there's this real, I think, growing appreciation for a career that's going to end just short of 30 years at KU and maybe just short of a half century.
32 at KU, yeah.
Okay, 32
total,
at KU
yeah,
and
right.
almost a half century.
Yeah,
in
48
the
total.
Okay.
Wow. I was 8 when I started, so that explains some of that.
Well, I guess I want to start this off by asking you if you've started to feel a little nostalgic about everything yet.
Absolutely. I've looked into those parking passes. That little pad's getting smaller, and we're down to 2 home games, and which is 2 games. And then I think, unless you go to the national championship game, you won't know which will be the last game.
That's right.
So yeah.
So you better have at least some formed in your mind what you might say on that last for that last one. Hopefully, maybe in your case, for Kansas fans, it's what a way to go out.
Wouldn't that be something? Well,
with confetti in your head.
I suggested it to Bill. He didn't seem totally opposed to that idea. Extend the season into April.
That's right. Well, I'm so glad you're here to talk to us. I want to people are interested in how you got into this business, and let me see if I have this right. Born in Iola?
Iola, Kansas. My dad was in the Pacific. At the time, Mom was with her parents, who were in Iowa at that time, and he didn't see me till I was like 18 or 19 months old. So we had to make up that time at the end, which we did. Iola, Kansas. We lived in Independence. Her dad, for a few years, worked for the newspaper as the sports editor. Did a little part-time radio work, in fact, and then we moved to, believe it or not, Manhattan for 2 years. We lived in Manhattan. I went to 5th and 6th grade there, and grade school kids could get into a Hearn Fieldhouse for 50 cents. And I could go watch Jack Parr and Bob Boozer and Roy DeWitt, some of those great teams.
Tex
Winter was the coach, and that was an absolute blast.
And from there to Topeka.
Moved to Topeka, lived there through junior high, high school, college years. Yeah.
College at Washburn,
right? Yeah.
And then you were off to become a lawyer,
Well, Dad wanted me to go to law school, and I think he had always thought that would be a great idea, be a great background for any business. And so I did go to law school for a year, but I really had this broadcast thing in mind. And in those days, you had deferments when you were in college, and mine was going to run out after 1 year of law school, so I joined a reserve unit and went to basic training and so on. And I told Dad, when I come back, I want to try this other thing. And he said, well, okay. So I did. My brother, much younger brother, did go to law school later, and I know Dad took great pride in that. But I don't think that was necessarily for me. I have a lot of friends I went to law school with, but I was fortunate to get to have a plan or an idea of something I'd like to do and have it come true.
There you go. And it starts in Hayes.
Right.
And so you're, I want to say 1968?
So, summer of 68, I get the job at KAYS Radio and Television, and we had a really good staff of guys. In fact, they had told me a while later, I'm not bragging about this. I think they saw me as a nice economic move, but I was the first person they had hired full-time who had not worked somewhere else. That was my first job, and it was a great opportunity to do radio, everything you could do there, and television. And as luck would have it, after about 3 months, our news and sports director left to take a job in Michigan, so I got to kind of fall into the sports stuff. But even before that, was 68 was an election year. Since he left, I got to have a fairly prominent role on election coverage on television, which was a heck of an experience in 1968. I've been fascinated by the whole thing in broadcasting, not just being a sports guy, but the whole thing and the news and entertainment and everything that goes with radio and television. But I love radio. Radio is so personal. It's a one-on-one deal. It's human voice conversation. I just think, I don't know what the future of radio is exactly, but it's certainly been great while I've been part of it.
Well, and I think sports on radio is such a there's just such a connection between
Right.
fan and I know people who the Royals over the last couple of years, I think, have reconnected with a fan
Sure,
base
absolutely.
here with Denny Matthews and some of the voices there. They now connect with a happy time in their lives.
Absolutely.
And that's what's and so there was a very happy time for fans of Fort Hays State in 1984, as you're calling basketball.
National championship, NAIA championship. Bill Morris was the coach, and of course the games were at Kemper Arena. So I've covered 3 teams that won national titles, and 2 of those games were at Kemper Arena. How's that for right in your backyard? Of course, KU in '88.
You told me something earlier I didn't realize, that in that year that you covered the final, what proved to be your final year covering Fort Hays State or calling their games, you had done some work for another black and gold Tigers team.
Missouri Tigers. I filled in for my buddy John Rooney on about half the broadcasts. I was so nervous that I would say Fort Hays. I'd only done Fort Hays 16 years. They're black and gold, but I don't think I ever did. And, that was an interesting experience. The Missouri Net at that time had like 75 stations, including KMOX in St. Louis, so it was a real thrill to do those ball games. Norman Stewart was great, and that really, kind of led to the association with Learfield at that time, and that evolved into KU the next year.
And it's the 84-85 season, which is Larry Brown's second, at Kansas. Danny Manning's freshman year.
Right, Danny and I are classmates, we like to say.
Jayhawks were on their way to a incredible stretch of men's basketball that continues to this day. You're there almost on the ground floor of this. That must have been an exciting time for you.
Oh, it really is, and KU basketball had been big, at times, the Clyde Lovellette years and Wilt Chamberlain and, Fogg Allen is part of KU and Dick Harp and Ted Owens, had a great run. He had 2 Final Fours and could have had another one except for one little out-of-bounds call. But there was great history and great tradition, but winning the title with Danny and the Miracles and the things that happened after that have probably taken it, as they say, to a new level.
Let me ask you this. I've always been curious asking broadcasters about this. Do you your call of the end of the game, was there time to think about that, or was it extemporaneous? What did it just come to you?
Yeah, I've never planned anything to say. I'm not smart enough, because if you plan it, then it won't happen. But you have to, as they say, let the game come to you. It is extemporaneous speaking, but you do prepare a lot, but you never know what's going to happen. And hopefully it's satisfactory. It's exciting. I think it's okay to show excitement. That's always been my approach. I've always told students in broadcasting classes about sports play-by-play. There are as many ways to do it as there are people doing it. And I can point out a lot of people, how they do it, how he does it, completely different, and they're both successful. I think you have to be yourself and, do the things you have to do, but that's the formula.
You can want the team that you're calling games for to win the game.
Well, I think you have to be aware what your audience is. If I'm doing a game on the Jayhawk network, probably most of my audience might be Jayhawk fans, and they would be happy if that was that. You can be being impartial and being objective are a little different. I think you have to be objective and understand other teams have good players. Buddy Hield happens to be a really good player. There are a lot of things like that, but it's okay if your team wins.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I understand. I think that's part of the connection and affection that fans feel for their broadcasters.
Yeah, for the quote unquote voice of
for Wyatt
of the
Thompson
team.
at K-State,
Exactly.
for Mike Kelly at Missouri. Absolutely.
Sure.
So, okay, so they win the '88 national championship in dramatic fashion. Then there's something of a change at Kansas. Roy Williams comes in. Glenn Mason comes in for football. It's kind of a different era now, or a new era in Kansas athletics. And that got me wondering about, in addition to the multitude of jobs that you've had and hats that you wear for Kansas, part of that is having to deal with these coaches on a talk show basis. You have to get to know these coaches in a way that probably nobody else gets to know them, and they all have their own personalities. Some easier to work with than others.
Oh, sure. Just like some people you deal with every day are harder to work with than other people. So, some coaches are just right here down the line. Some are, Bill Self is probably the ultimate guy who is a guy. He gets it. He understands what he's doing. He kind of has a feel for what you're doing. He'd be a great example of a wonderful guy to deal with. Now, not that some of the other guys weren't, but you have to kind of figure them out. And some guys are more sticklers for certain details than others. Some are, kind of unorganized. I always said Larry Brown his life was kind of chaotic except for the basketball part.
He was a genius.
He's you and I've talked. He's a basketball savant.
Yep.
He remembers the inbounds play the Carolina Cougars ran against the Kentucky Colonels, that won the game, and the ABA, and that's not an understatement. But it's fascinating to get to know and work with those guys because they're all really good at what they do, and I really admire that.
This will be a great opportunity to remind people of a job that you had that I don't know if many people remember this, but you were the national voice for the women's Final Four.
I was. I think I did the women's Final Four 5 or 6 times in the 90s.
In the 90s.
Yeah, when KU didn't go to the Final Four, I invariably got to do that, and that was a really interesting experience. And you talk about wanting your team to win. That was a chance to do a completely neutral national broadcast. And while I enjoyed it and it was fun and an interesting experience, it wasn't as much fun.
No. But you called Connecticut's first national championship.
Yes, we did. We got that rolling for them, didn't we? And the big last-second shot for North Carolina.
Yep. Yes,
so you were along on some
I
of
was
those great jaunts.
We covered the women's Final Four back.
Having
back
that in Kansas City, wasn't that a great event at that time?
That was. It was because Kansas. That was the '98 season,
right?
And Kansas went out in the second round. So basketball fans in this part of the country could focus on the women's Final Four here. Did you call that one in '98?
I did.
At Kemper.
That was my last one.
Okay.
I mean, I've kidded you for years. I think now the record's been broken with the Royals and so on, but that was the biggest star coverage of any sports event. How many people did you have covering that women's Final Four?
Everybody but me, because I was at the men's Final Four in San Antonio that year. We did blanket the coverage of that. So Roy Williams gets to 4 Final Fours and the Glenn Mason a couple of bowl games, and then it turns over again in the 2000s with Mark Mangino comes into Kansas and Bill Self. Football, we probably don't talk enough about that. Football elevates, gets to a place in 2007 that it hadn't been for a century and hasn't been since.
Right.
We can talk forever about Kansas basketball and how great it is, but that 2007 football season had to be the best.
It really was, and that school year, the 07-08 school year. I don't know if anybody's had a similar thing. Maybe somebody has, but for the football team to go 12-1 and go to a BCS bowl and win it was just colossal. Chris Harris, who plays for the Denver Broncos, was back at the spring game last year, and David Lawrence and I were asking about his experiences in college, and he said the best experience he had winning the Orange Bowl, and then at the end of the school year, the basketball team won the national championship. How's that for one of the football guys to say that? But that was amazing, and I'm not sure we realized at the time exactly what it was, but it was colossal.
It was, and maybe we'll tie up football. It's not in a good place, at least competitively right now. What have been your kind of observations about football over the last few years?
Well, yeah, when you have a lot of coaching changes, you kind of go back to square one or maybe even beyond square one because you have attrition, and it's a numbers game, football, more than anything else. And when your numbers are down It's really a difficult process getting that built back up. I think Dave Beatty, with his recruiting ties to Texas and his boundless energy, I mean, he's on the go all the time. I think he's got a chance to get it where they want it to be, but it's going to take a little time, and people need to be patient, and I think they are. But he's lost a couple of staff members. He's going to have to replace that, but that's certainly doable. But hopefully it's in the right hands. Cheyenne Zenger, I think, understands the importance of that, and hopefully it'll come to pass.
Am I right about this, that besides Denny Matthews and Fred White, you would have called Royals games for as long or longer than anybody?
I hadn't thought of that. That's probably true. Buddy Blattner left in the 70s, so I would have been more years than that, I think, because he started with the original team. Denny Treese did television for a number of years on Channel 4. Ryan's probably past me now.
Maybe, maybe
Ryan came like my second year, so Ryan's he's an old timer now. So yeah.
But that was a big chunk of your career was doing the Royals. How'd that come about for you?
Well, Paul
and I know baseball was big for you.
Love baseball. I've been around minor league baseball, and I've been an A's fan, and felt so terrible when they moved. And then of course a Royals fan, and Paul Spudoff and I did pre and post game shows on KMBZ radio. And we had talked about maybe the opportunity, maybe we could work together somehow. Split they decided to add an analyst to the telecast, and he got that job. And then 2 or 3 guys later, they had an opening, and I was fortunate to get it. And I think he helped a lot, and some other people. And we teamed up on TV for a few years, and then they decided to move guys around a little bit. Ryan wanted to do some TV as well as radio, so we all moved around, and that was interesting. So I got to do a lot of the radio as well, and that's one of the real, in a way it's easy, and another way it's a real challenge, doing Major League Baseball every day for 100, in my case about 150 games, because I'd missed a few for football, and keeping it fresh. But that's so unique about baseball. I don't care what your record is, and we saw some 100 lost teams over that period of time, and a 19-game losing streak, by the way. You can go to the ballpark and not know who's going to win that night.
True.
Lousy teams win a third of their games. So you take that to the ballpark, and boy, there's nothing like going to the ballpark on a summer night.
Keeps
Just
you going,
terrific.
Doesn't it? So what was 2013 or 2012 the final year?
12. I filled in on a handful of games in 13.
Right. When they started turning the
Ryan
corner.
had an addition to his family, but 12 was my last full season. Yeah.
So I can remember driving to work on days 10, 15 years ago, and listening to you as the sports director of KMBZ 980 AM while you were broadcasting Kansas games and Royals games. I cannot imagine the schedule that you had to have kept in those years during the crossover time. And as a sports director, there was always crossover time, but you had to be the hardest working man in broadcasting then.
I wasn't digging fence post holes. I mean, it wasn't, but it was the kind of work I like. But as I always said, the hours aren't good, but there's lots of them. So, you can kind of catch yourself coming and going. But I was doing morning sports and ball games, and when I was on the road, I did the stuff from wherever we were for the radio station. But yeah, that was pretty hectic for a while. But it's kind of what I signed on for. And I'm going to do major college football and basketball and Major League Baseball. Wow. What would I have done to have this opportunity? Well, now I'm doing it.
Great. As the season winds down, I know you and I have talked about this earlier, but you're visiting arenas for the last time.
Right.
You've visited some for the last time, like Nebraska, Missouri, and Colorado.
Right.
Not knowing that those were the last time you were going to be there.
Isn't that sad?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
But Iowa State, Oklahoma, K-State, others in the buildings for the final time, and I know at some of these stops, all of them, I think, that I've been to, you've been honored and recognized.
Right.
And that's a very nice gesture on the school's part. And you're starting to get a little nostalgic about this?
Well, like I've told you before, the fraternity of our guys in our conference is really good, and other guys around the country that do the same thing we do. And the guys have been really nice. We'll get together here in Kansas City on Tuesday night before the tournament, all have a dinner, and it may turn into more of a roast the way it's starting to sound. But the guys in our league are great, and they've all been, along with their athletic directors or coaches or whoever, very, very nice.
Yeah. What are you going to miss about this?
Everything, I think. I've just done it for so long. There's an ego thing. I mean, you like, but that's not the main thing at this stage. I've just enjoyed being part of it. Going on road trips and getting to know the kids. I've had, in this last week at Allen Fieldhouse, I had 2 guys come to visit with me who played basketball at Fort Hays in the early 70s.
How about that?
Well, who are these old guys? No, and it's just so much fun to have that happen and think of all the people I've been around and the exhilarating moments or the heartbreaking moments that you share with all those people and to have, I think, a lot of friendships because of that. I can't look back and think of any other thing I would have rather done.
I know one thing that you're going to do in retirement, and that is follow Stephen wherever he ends up broadcasting, which right now is at UMKC. And in football at Washburn, is it?
Well, he did Washburn for a year. This last year he did 2 games a week on Channel 62. He did a high school game of the week on Friday, and then he did a Heart of America Conference game of the week. So that gave him a nice bit of TV experience and ruse, and this will be his 3rd year doing KU baseball. He did minor league baseball in the Royal system for 9 years. He was at the rookie league team in Idaho Falls for 3, and then at the AA Northwest Arkansas for 6. So he knows a lot of these Royal players before many people knew them. Yeah.
He was in on the ground floor
of
this team. So how about any other thoughts about retirement and what's the future hold for you?
Well, we've got 3 grandchildren, thanks to Stephen and his wife Katie, and Landon's 5 and Will's 3, and then our baby girl is 4.5 months. So that's great fun, and they're less than an hour away. So that's a fun job for us right now, learning how to be grandparents.
There you go. I think that is going to wrap it up for us. Bob, I can't thank you enough for coming down here and sharing thoughts on your career and on Kansas. We've had a great time talking to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you much. And thank you for listening to Sports Beat KC.